political calculation. And that political calculation is we are going to keep whining about it. We are going to keep pretending this is a crisis.
Pretending that this is a crisis. Look, I'm sad to say that Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is wrong.
TYT is calling out MSNBC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and the progressive Democratic establishment. This day has finally come. Now, about 2 weeks ago, I did this video. New York rep, who was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she was trying to test the narrative that the migrant crisis was made up. It didn't exist. And in this video, I played a clip of the mayor of New York City calling it out, saying, no, it does exist. Matter of fact, it could destroy New York City.
New at 11 now, Mayor Adams more passionate than we've seen about the asylum seeker crisis. As more buses arrived at Port Authority today, the mayor says the city is severely impacted by the influx of migrants. Speaking at a town hall meeting tonight on the Upper West Side, the mayor said that he doesn't see an end to this problem as the city is not getting enough support from the federal government.
This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City. We're getting 10,000 migrants a month. Now we're getting people from all over the globe have made their minds up that they're going to come through the southern part of the border and come into New York City.
The mayor says the city currently supporting 110,000 asylum seekers that have arrived in the 5 boroughs since April of 2022.
All right, so I thought AOC was talking nonsense. And in political spheres, the way you want to get a message out or a narrative out is that first you test it. You test it on a small group of people. You go on one show, you say something, and if there's not like huge backlash or people seeming of accepting of it, you continue to say it. So now it seems like the narrative on the left is that the migrant crisis doesn't exist and it's racist. Now, you can't tell that to the people in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Denver, to those mayors who are all begging for more money and help, and the migrant crisis is real and it could destroy New York City, as you just saw. But that seems to be what they're trying to push. And it's gotten to the point where even progressive left-wing lunatics on TYT had to call it out.
They're increasingly, from the Tea Party on, they're voting on race. They're voting on this idea of an invasion of brown people over the border. They're just voting specifically on racial animus. At this stage, it isn't about economics.
No, which is why Trump killed the immigration bill.
Correct.
That's why. And because otherwise, he can't run against the other and brown people and people who don't look like him. I mean, if you look at some of these exit polls, I mean, I live in Virginia. Immigration was the #1 issue. I mean, again, these could change in Virginia.
Well, Virginia does have a border with West Virginia. Very contested area.
Build the wall.
As Super Tuesday election results trickled in.
I'm sorry, I gotta stop it right here. How ridiculous was that? In Virginia that's close. Listen, you could say the same thing about the people in New York or in Illinois. Or what about the people in Denver, Colorado, in the heart of the country, right? They're only surrounded by other states. It shows you how desperate one side is to keep the racism narrative alive. Because if they don't keep that narrative alive, they know they can't win. And now that narrative is starting to be destroyed because the migrant crisis has nothing to do with race. What it does have to do with managing resources, right? It has to do with managing resources. We just don't have enough resources to take care of this many people from this particular country. If they're black, white, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And now that New York has got these 100,000 people and have to take care of them, that's the issue. So I'm sorry, I should have stopped here, but what they're saying is just so ridiculous. I see why any reasonable, rational people would say, like, yeah, this is nonsense.
Last night, the liberal media intelligentsia provided a case study of what denial looks like. Don't be fooled by the ladies of MSNBC joining forces to jovially mock voters who express concern about the migrant crisis. Because if one looks closely enough, you can see that Wojak mask slipping. I suspect they're actually panicking about the vulnerabilities of the Democratic Party as we barrel toward the general election. They absolutely should be panicking, by the way. Unfortunately, instead of hearing voters,
I feel like I'm in Bizarro World. It seems like this is Fox News because she is like killing up.
Out, the women of MSNBC have chosen ignorance and denial instead.
Every election cycle, particularly when there's a Democratic incumbent, we get reminded about the borders, and the borders become a thing again. And then if there's a Republican in office, we don't think about them anymore. It's the deficit and the border. Like you make these things an issue. You make them into boogeymen. You make them into something that grabs you from under the bed at night as soon as you wake up. As long as there's a Democratic incumbent to blame on it, you make sure that nothing's ever done to fix either, and then you hope that people stop talking about them once you've got a Republican in office.
Now, look, I'm sure that there have been many examples of political opponents to Democrats exaggerating claims of immigration, but this ain't it. There's very clearly a migrant crisis. In December alone, 300,000 people crossed the border in just 1 month. And there are local communities who have been really struggling to appropriately respond to the influx of migrants who have arrived into their cities. And look, for viewers who have convinced themselves that the denial demonstrated by the gaggle of gals on MSNBC is in no way indicative of progressives, I have unfortunate.
That's right, the gaggle of gals. I like the way she put that. But let's really think about it, because she's doing a monologue, right? She's reading a script. But one thing I do want to be very close to is that, think about it, people. And I need you to think about this. The people who are MSNBC are calling racist aren't the Republicans. That's the black and brown people in New York with their black and brown mayor. That's the black and brown people in Chicago with their black and brown mayor. Right? Those are the people who they're telling you are lying to you about the migrant crisis. It's not the Republicans. It's those people. When the mayor said, as we played earlier, there's a crisis, there's this, there's that. They're all states of emergency everywhere. They're saying other Democrats are lying to you about this.
The idea that Republicans, in order to win an election, say we need to hermetically seal the border when they know that that is economic self-sabotage to the US economy. And they are saying, let's do it anyway, while ginning up this false narrative about this being a crisis. And there is not only no moral calculation, there is no economic calculation, there is no logical calculation, there is only a political calculation. And that political calculation is we are going to keep whining about it. We are going to keep pretending this is a crisis.
Pretending there is a crisis. Now, I have not watched this video yet, but I want to see how they respond to AOC, because these people, the Young Turks, are the biggest AOC fans. They love AOC. They supported her in her campaign. They cheered when she got elected the first time. So this is AOC's, these are her people. Let's see what Anna says about that, because what she just said was all nonsense. It's crazy. Does she really think people believe? Anyway, let's roll the clip.
Pretending that this is a crisis. Look, I'm sad to say that Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is wrong. What's really unsettling is that she should know there's a migrant crisis. After all, she represents a district in New York where local officials have struggled to find shelter for the 171,000 plus migrants who arrived in the city recently. AOC herself addressed the migrant crisis just last September in front of the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City. Now you tell me if this doesn't look like a crisis to you.
Increase federal resources to cities and municipalities dealing with this issue. The second is to allow for work authorizations so that folks in here can get to work and start supporting themselves as soon as possible. They are prevented from getting jobs, they are prevented from employment, and that is part of the strain on our public systems.
Yeah, barriers for who? For who? For us? For the United States? No, you come down. You're complicit in destroying our city. You come down, you own breaker. You gotta go to sleep at night. Hey, but
Now, just for context, people, this is New York City. This is liberal, democratic New York City. And she's giving a speech in front of the Roosevelt Hotel where all these migrants are. And she can't even get words out. She's being shouted down by a crowd of NYCP voters and NYC citizens talking about how crazy this migrant crisis is. But there's no crisis. There's no crisis.
Look, I'm sure the angry individuals in that video will just be brushed off as deranged right-wing lunatics who were sent there to harass AOC and give the false impression, of course, that people are worked up about our broken immigration system, right? If you think that, you're also wrong, but that's okay, because anecdotal evidence is oftentimes extremely misleading. So let's actually take a step back and take a broader look at broad public opinion in New York. For example, a Quinnipiac University poll just last September found that 62% of voters said that they agreed with New York City Mayor Eric Adams' statement from September, where he said that an influx of migrants will destroy the city.
You know, this is the face of someone who's waking up to the realization that they're being lied to. Now, AOC is lying. She's not mistaken. She's lying. And what do I mean by lying? I mean, AOC knows damn well that there is a migrant crisis. It's real and it's affecting everyone. She knows that there's a problem. And on top of that, she knows how all these democratic cities are dealing with it. It's tough. And to say there is no crisis is not a mistake. That is an outright lie.
I really hate the framing of that question, because it makes it seem like there's something inherently negative or nefarious about migrants, and there just isn't. Most of these people came to America to work hard and build better lives for themselves and their families. That takes tenacity, resilience, and the willingness to take risks that I admire. I'll always feel deep gratitude for having the privilege of growing up in Reseda, California, a community where the majority of residents consisted of Latino immigrants. They've enriched my life. I'm a child of immigrants myself, and we are a nation of immigrants. It's important to remember that. However, our immigration system is absolutely broken, and there are loopholes in our laws that human traffickers, unfortunately, are well versed in. These loopholes allow for the unmanageable influx of migrants into the country at a time when we don't have enough judges to process asylum claims. And this also comes at a time when we clearly have a shortage of housing for American citizens. According to that same Quinnipiac poll, a whopping 85% of New York City voters are either very concerned or somewhat concerned that the city will not be able to accommodate the surge in migrants who have sought sanctuary in the city, and their right to worry. The federal government has sent the city some resources, but hundreds of millions of dollars apparently ain't enough. New York City has received about $140 million in federal funding for shelters, which is more than any other city not on the southwest border. The White House told New York Governor Kathy Hochul in August that it cannot send more federal assistance to the state, blaming congressional hurdles for the inability. So New York is left to pick up the tab.
The sad part about this whole thing is anyone with half a brain would have already known that if you have millions of people coming into the country who can't work, who have no jobs and all this other stuff, how are you going to take care of them? And it's going to cost money to do all that. And as you see, the government gave over $100 million to the city of New York, more as if they were on a border town. And it's still not enough. So where's this money going to come from? Right? But as soon as you start saying that, and sometimes I think Democrats believe that there's this just unlimited amount of resources and money that we can always pull from. It's funny how they always complain about the Republicans and the deficit, but the Democrats are the spenders. They want to spend. If AOC had her way, she would have the federal government spend whatever the amount possible on these migrants. And then it comes back to the people of the city. It's like, well, what about us? We've been here all this time. They're not spending any amounts of money. You know, we got homeless people here that we can't take care of. Now, all of a sudden, you can take care of all these migrants? I think I think this migrant crisis, immigration crisis, may be the straw that breaks the camel's back because it's hitting them at home in those Democratic cities.
And it ain't cheap, as local leaders in Denver have recently learned. Here's Mayor Mike Johnson laying out some tough budgetary sacrifices Denver had to make recently to accommodate their growing migrant population.
We are announcing today we will make some changes both to our services at DMV and to our services on Parks and Rec. What that looks like for DMV is we are no longer taking vehicle registrations in person. We will move those to online. We will start rotating weekly DMV closures starting on March 4th. Our central spot at Tremont will stay open permanently, but our other satellite spots will rotate, closing 1 week at a time. We will have folks that are hourly workers that will have fewer hours. If we reduce your hours and you're an on-call worker, that's true. We will have on-call workers we won't hire for the summer we would have hired otherwise. We will also have to make some hard decisions around reducing services for Parks and Rec heading into this summer and spring. That means beginning February 20th, we will reduce hours at our rec centers. Our regional centers that are 7 days will come back to 6 days. Those sites that are 6 days will stay at 6 days, but will reduce hours. We are planning for the entire 2024 budget, so we believe we have to make it through this entire year. And so these changes will be in effect until we can get back to a balanced budget. We think it will take us the 2024 year.
You know, it's crazy. I didn't even know Denver had cut all those services because of the migrant crisis. Look at all those services they cut. DMV goes, we're going to start rotating them out weekly. There's one DMV going to be open for everybody all the time, but then all the rest of them are going to go close for once a week, cutting everybody's hours, doing all this. And it's because Denver, let's just be real, is a sanctuary city. They love being we're a sanctuary city, sanctuary city, sanctuary city. Now you got people who are seeking sanctuary, and there's a cost to that. And now they are paying the cost. And the people who are most hurt by their politicians declaring them a sanctuary city and saying, begging migrants to come there, are the people who voted for them, right? Those Democrats who voted, they probably like, what the hell? We didn't want all this. And now even places like Chicago are saying they want to reverse the sanctuary city. New York says we want to reverse the sanctuary city. We don't want this. This is ridiculous. We don't need this. But it's crazy because, like I keep saying, the people who are hurt most by the policies of the Democrats when it comes to immigration are the people who they say they want to help the most. That's just the reality. Look at what's going on in Denver.
Not good. I think we can all agree that economic instability and growing wealth inequality has led to growing rage in America. I certainly feel it. So when Americans start seeing cuts to programs in their communities to house migrants instead, honestly, I can understand their frustration, even if it doesn't always manifest in the healthiest ways. Tensions have been simmering within the Black community in Chicago, for instance. Much of their fury has been directed at progressive Mayor Brandon Johnson, who has mostly responded to the crisis by being as welcoming to migrants as he can be. The kindness has been costly to both the city and his political career. In an attempt to be transparent with voters in Chicago and Illinois, the Comptroller's Office for the state of Illinois has published a website that discloses the total amount spent on the migrant crisis by taxpayers. So if you take a look at this is from the website itself. From November 1st of last year to March 5th of this year, state expenditures total more than $31,200,000. It's a lot of money. It's also just the tip of the iceberg. The governor, J.D. Pritzker, has pledged around $182 million in state funds for Chicago, while Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle has committed up to $70 million more in a joint funding plan to ensure migrants sent to the city from Texas have access to wraparound services and health care. Those funds come on top of the state committing $160 million in November to undocumented immigrants for welcome, shelter, and independence. That commitment was in addition to $478 million the state has spent since the start of the response, according to the governor's office. And obviously those funds include both the state's resources and some of the federal money that's been sent to Illinois to grapple with the migrant crisis. Now look, this crisis has shifted the politics of longtime Democratic community activists in Chicago, including a woman by the name of Kata Truss, who filed a lawsuit against Chicago over the migrant crisis.
I certainly don't want to demonize the migrants because not a lot of what is happening is their fault. I think that our mayor, our governor, as well as President Biden, has to step in and make some changes to what is happening right now. Right now, it seems as if our borders are just open and that people are freely coming in and that there are no laws that are being followed in terms of immigration. Now, when you talk about the Black communities here in the city of Chicago, and you talk about the years of disinvestment in our communities, in our schools, and all around us, and you see this amount of money being spent to people who have come from outside of this country, that is a problem for us. At a time where we're seeing increased crime because our children don't have things to do, they don't have jobs, and we're seeing this money being spent, and it's being spent on other people in communities that could really benefit for that money.
Now, even without it being a black or white issue, there are many more poor white people than there are black people. But let's talk about poor people in general. We're taking billions and billions and hundreds of millions of dollars and paying for migrants to come here and live in hotels and all this other stuff. But the people who are already here, we weren't taking care of them. So now the argument for the people in Chicago is like, hold on, you're finding all of this money to essentially take care of people who you don't even know. This is from Venezuela. They come and they say, we're migrants, we need help. And there it is. We can find hundreds of millions of dollars. But when I said, hey, open up the rec center so my kids can play in the rec center, oh, we can't do that. Well, why don't you go open up this so we can, no, we can't do that. Okay, you can fix the street. No, we can't do that. No money, no money, no money. You guys always talking about, we have no money. Now, all of a sudden, we have plenty of money? This is the problem. This is the problem. And this is the problem with which I think is going to separate, finally, separate the Democrats from the minority population. Because 90% of black people vote Democrat. I don't vote for Democrat anymore, but 90% of black people vote Democrat. Something like 80, 90%. But right now, Trump has got like 20% of the black vote in recent polls. And that's just been increasing. Remember something like, I think Romney had like 3% or 4%, but even though he was going up against the first black president, right? That's a different story. But we can talk about Bill Clinton. We can go all the way back, right? Blacks vote for Democrats. This woman ain't voting for Democrats anymore, right? Because at the end of the day, they're being pushed out by these horrible policies. And like she said, the border can't be this open. We've got to have some rules, some regulations. Hey, we're all for helping people, but my God, this is ridiculous. So let me know how you feel in the comment section. Let me know what you think about TYT calling out this nonsense, because at the end of the day, this is the reality of it. And I think now people are finally starting to wake up to see that, hey, this has never been about racism. It's about reality. Peace.